Well, I have to wonder if that Christmas dinner would be anything like the Brad Underwood press conference that we saw for Illinois lately. And I know we have it on deck. Let's run it, see what happened.
Completely unacceptable. The lack of leadership on this team is zero. It is none.
Brad, you've talked a lot about TJ's leadership since he's gotten here.
That's what I thought of that today. But I'm just telling you, our approach to this game right now is immature, and it lacks complete 100% lack of leadership. And if I got to go back to leading again, this team's in trouble. Somebody on this team's got to step up.
I was not happy at all, like, that we were down 3 to a team like that. It wasn't funny to me at all, and people were laughing, and I just came in and I was pretty upset in the huddle, and I let everybody know.
Matt, these are 2 games where I don't think you guys feel good about your effort. What's this time mean for this team? Like, what's this team at right now?
I'm the wrong guy to ask about that because I really have my own opinions about this that I would not be saying up here on this podium. I think we got a lot to figure out internally between the players and the coaches.
And I disagree with that. Every player. Matt's been in a system for 4 years, and not every player's like him.
Well, for starters, the fart noise went viral on the internet. I feel like it's all I have seen for the last week. But secondly, this is an Illinois team that is kind of new from the standpoint of it's added so many freshmen and transfers, and you're still in December, so you're relatively trying to iron the kinks out. But coach, for this type of exchange to happen in the media, how do you feel about it from that vantage point?
Well, I'm sure Brad probably, like most coaches do at the beginning of the year, talked about, what happens in-house, what happens on our practice court, what happens in the locker room stays in our locker room. And, I'm sure after the game, he probably voiced his displeasure to the team and was transparent with that with the media. And it becomes a tough situation, and so I don't envy Brad having to figure it out.
Chris, if you would say that, right, that keep it in the locker room, but didn't he go against that in a way of then calling out his players publicly?
But again, he may reference that in the locker room, like that he was going to, talk in the press conference about the lack of leadership, and maybe, again, that's why I hate to speculate, because all this stuff happens behind closed doors. Has this been an issue for the last 2 weeks? Has he been screaming at every practice that he doesn't have leadership that's stepping up to the plate? Was that the straw that broke the camel's back? Again, maybe he didn't have that type of preseason meeting where he didn't talk about what we talk about with the media. But it's a tough situation. I'm sure it's going to have some type of, resolution between, Mayer and Brad. They're going to have to sit down and, again, I think that's what happens nowadays when the game is so transient. Kids are coming and going.
Mm-hmm.
You've got 5th years, you've got COVID juniors, you've got kids transferring to third schools. It's just a little.
Well, he knew what he could get away with like Trent Frazier, who he coached with for years, right? Kofi. Now with Matthew Mayer, think about it. He goes from playing for Scott Drew to Brad Underwood. Those are 2 completely different personalities and coaching styles. Scott Drew might be the most positive human being on the planet, literally on the planet. And Brad is old school, comes from that Huggins tree, right? So like I think Brad's probably trying to figure out what buttons to push to get as much as he can leadership-wise out of a kid that has not been a leader, Matthew Mayer. And the same thing with Terrence Shannon, to be honest. Terrence Shannon, think about it, like he's been kind of a piece. Well, now you're the dude. And I need you to be not only the dude on the court, consistent player, but I need you to lead a bunch of young guys, right? Jaden Epps, Scott Clark, some of these other guys, even Coleman Hawkins. Coleman Hawkins has been there, but he hasn't done a whole heck of a lot. So I think Brad's trying to figure out, right, like play psychiatrist with these kids.
Yeah, a little bit, and I think, when you talk about those kids transferring in, they transferred in for a different situation. They made the choice to play for Brad Underwood. You would think that, there'd be a little bit of, resolution behind closed doors before it goes to the media, because now it's just going to be brought up. It's going to be an issue. It's going to be talked about. It's going to be an uncomfortableness, after certain games and interviews and whatnot. It's just behind you, and every loss, everything's going to be magnified. And so, man, it's a tough situation. That's why you always wanted to be able to resolve these things in-house and keep it within the family, because everybody goes through these type of situations. But when they become public,
because we want to know, then we're going to ask those questions after every loss, right? Like, Matt, we're going to run up to Matthew Mayer after every loss. Now, what do you think? How's your relationship now with coach? What did coach say to you after the game? All that.
100%. I mean, I had some guys that I coached, JP McCura, if everything was an open book and, we had to talk about and report to you guys everything that happened in a practice or, a competitive situation. I mean, you'd be tap dancing in front of the media. And so, again, tough situation. I don't like when, kids go behind the microphone, and that's why I tried to, take the bullets when a guy wasn't playing well or the leadership wasn't what you wanted, just sort of try to deal with that behind closed doors and, try to get your point across one-on-one rather than, through the media.
Illinois plays Missouri tomorrow, last game before Christmas, those dang Christmas games. How important is it going to be for Matthew Mayer to come out and have a great game and to see kind of that storyline, put it into it?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily he has to have a great game. I think if you pull the quotes from Coach Underwood, I think he wants leadership. I think he wants, to see a guy that's bringing those young guys along, that, whatever he wants out of his team. Maybe it's defensively, guys getting on the floor. Maybe it's taking charges. Maybe it's making the extra pass. Can't say that I know, but I don't think that he's asking him to get 25 and 15. And then, I'm going to be happy to be your coach. I think he wants to see him lead those young guys. And sometimes it's not easy when you're a transfer. It's a new situation for you. But again, he chose to play for Brad, and I think he's got to figure it out if he wants to.
And you got to know as a kid to some degree who you're playing for, right? You're doing your research. You got to know what you're getting yourself into. I mean, this is a guy who, again, was a JUCO guy years ago, came up through Bob Huggins. Like, come on. I mean, Myers smart enough to understand that.
Yeah. And this, I mean, you covered recruiting for so long. You ask every kid, what are the main factors in their recruitment? And then they're a little bit smarter when they're coming out of college rather than coming out of high school. Right. They're going to say, I want a relationship with the head coach. I want an opportunity. When I look at the roster, I'm going to see is there a path to get to the next level? I mean, those are like three standard things that a kid will say. And so, but first and foremost, man, you want to know who that head coach is and, how he coaches and what type of style he employs.
But to that point, with the portal the way it is right now, I mean, the second someone goes in, these kids are committing within 48 hours somewhere else. Because of the nature of the portal now, do kids have as much time to really do their homework?
I think that there are a lot of ways to be able to figure out whether it's your high school coach, your AAU coach that, knows these guys. Maybe it was they recruited you coming out of high school, whether it's getting on your computer, whatever the case is. But they certainly don't have a year to play around with. They have about 2 or 3 weeks to try to figure out their next destination. But, maybe that's why some kids should take a little bit longer and decide is transferring really the best option for me.
It's going to be interesting to kind of see how this era of college basketball evens out over the course of the next 5 years, just because, this is kind of a new thing that we're seeing with no transfer. You don't have to sit out rather. And it's kind of become the NBA free agency with no salary cap. So going to be interesting to see how that turns out.